Today, we are diving into a really fascinating, and honestly, a very personal corner of the law. We're going to talk about situations where the whole system of justice, all of its power, just stops. It can't move forward on its own. We're talking about crimes that are so intimate, so deeply connected to a person's dignity, that the law itself actually takes a step back. It waits. And what's it waiting for? An invitation, a key that's held by only one person, the one who is wronged. So let's explore this incredible idea, the laws that decide who gets to turn that key, and why.
I mean, think about it. A crime happens. What's our first instinct? We expect the police, the prosecutors, the whole state apparatus to jump into action, right? To investigate, to find the person responsible, and to bring them to justice for all of us. But what if I told you there's a whole category of crimes where that entire powerful system is legally required to just stand down? Where it's totally powerless, completely frozen, until one single person, the victim, makes the conscious choice to unlock the door to the courtroom. It sounds like something from a movie, but it's not. It's the very real legal puzzle we're going to piece together today.
All right, so here's our game plan for today. First up, we'll look at why justice needs an invitation, what that even means. Then we're going to get into the pardon and the paradox, which is all about how a case can literally just disappear. After that, we'll shift gears and go beyond bars to see how the law tries to help people rebuild. And finally, we'll tackle the most serious topic, what happens when protectors become accomplices.
Okay, let's dive right into our first section. The big idea here, the one you really have to wrap your head around, is that for some specific crimes, we're talking things like adultery, seduction, even rape, the state doesn't just automatically take charge. No. Instead, the entire power, to kickstart the legal process is intentionally placed right into the hands of the person who was harmed. They become the ultimate gatekeeper.
And this brings us to this core legal idea of private crimes. Think of it like this. Most crimes, say a robbery, happen out in the public square. A harm to one person is seen as a threat to all of society, so society, through the government, responds. But these offenses, the law sees them as happening inside a private room. The violation is so personal, so intimate, that the law's #1 priority is respecting the victim's privacy. The state can't just kick down the door to that room. It has to be invited in. And the victim holds the only key. They have the absolute undeniable right to decide if they want to use that key, or if for them, healing means keeping that door locked and prioritizing their own privacy over a public trial.
I mean, this just flips the whole script on what we think a criminal case looks like. Normally, the state is the one driving the car, and the victim is an important passenger, a key witness. But here, the roles are totally reversed. The state is more like a high-performance engine, just sitting there, waiting. It can't do a thing until the victim gets in the driver's seat and turns the key. And the goal isn't some abstract idea of public order. It's about addressing a deep, personal wound. And maybe most importantly, the victim isn't just a witness in their own story. They are the author, the one who decides if the story even gets told in a courtroom. Without them, there's no case. Period.
Now, let's get really specific, because the law draws some very clear lines. First, let's talk about crimes that concern the marriage vow, adultery and concubinage. For these, the law is unbelievably strict. The key to that courtroom door isn't just held by the victim in a general sense. No, it's held by one, and only one, person on the entire planet, the offended spouse. Nobody else. Not their parents, not the prosecutor, not a best friend who wants to help, only them. This legal design really hammers home the point that the crime is seen as a violation of the marital contract, and so only one of the parties to that contract gets to decide if it's a matter for the courts.
And the instruction manual for using that key is super precise. First, like we said, only the offended spouse can file. Second, and this one is so important, the complaint has to be a package deal. You have to go after both your unfaithful spouse and their partner. The law basically says you can't use the legal system to selectively punish your spouse's lover while letting your own partner off the hook. It's an all-or-nothing situation, which really prevents the law from being turned into a tool for personal revenge. And finally, that key becomes useless if the spouse knew about it and was okay with it, or if they've already forgiven them. The law's not going to step in if you've already handled the matter yourself.
Okay, now for the second group of these private crimes. We're talking about rape, seduction, abduction, and acts of lasciviousness. Here, the law is smart. It recognizes that the victim might be a minor, or maybe too traumatized or incapacitated to take action. So it creates a clear chain of command, a legal line of succession. The #1 person, the one who always holds the primary right, is the offended party herself. That's her key, first and foremost. But if, for whatever reason, she can't or doesn't want to use it, that right then passes down to her parents.
If they're not around, it goes to her grandparents, and the final backstop is her legal guardian. It's a safety net, really, designed to make sure that justice is still possible even when the victim isn't in a position to seek it out on her own.
So if the victim has the exclusive power to start a case, it only makes sense that they also have the power to stop it, right? Well, this is where things get really interesting. We're about to encounter the legal superpower of the pardon and the paradox of how a full-blown criminal case can just, poof, disappear. This quote, straight from the law itself, is as clear as it gets. A pardon from the victim isn't just a suggestion the court might consider. It's a full-on, legally binding stop sign. It bars prosecution. Think of it like this. The victim has a remote control for the entire legal proceeding. Even if the trial is underway, even if things are moving forward, they can hit the off button at any time. And when they do, the whole show is over. It's an immense amount of power, and it really underscores how much the law values the victim's personal choice in these matters.
Now, this pardon can show up in two different ways. The first is what we call an express pardon. This is the straightforward one. It's clear, direct, no room for interpretation. It could be a signed letter that says, "I forgive the offender and I want this case dropped." It could be a statement made right there in court. The moment that direct, express pardon is on the table, the gears of justice grind to a halt. Case closed.
The second type is a little more subtle, but it's just as powerful. It's called an implied pardon. This is where the law says, okay, your actions are speaking so loudly that I can't hear your words. The classic example is the one on screen. An offended spouse finds out about an affair, but then chooses to continue living with their unfaithful partner. You just can't walk into court and say, "My life has been ruined by this betrayal," while your actions at home show that you've reconciled and moved on. In the eyes of the law, your behavior has already issued a pardon, and you can't go back on it.
But of all the ways these cases can end, nothing, and I mean nothing, is as dramatic or as absolute as this next one. For the crimes of seduction, abduction, rape, or acts of lasciviousness, the law provides what you could call the ultimate off-ramp. It's a legal reset button that is so powerful it doesn't just stop the case. It makes the criminal liability vanish as if it never happened. And what is this ultimate off-ramp? It's marriage.
Let's just walk through how this works, because it's pretty wild. So the crime happens, a complaint is filed, maybe the case is even moving through the courts. But then comes the turning point. The offender marries the victim. The result is instant and total. The legal term is that the criminal action is extinguished. It's not just paused, it's wiped from existence. If a sentence had already been handed down, it gets remitted, which is just a fancy word for canceled. Now, this law comes from a very old idea about restoring a victim's honor, but in modern times, it stands as this almost unbelievable example of how a private act between two people can completely override the entire public process of criminal justice.
All right, so far, we've been all about the criminal case. Does it start? How can it stop? What's the punishment? But the law is smarter than that. It knows that justice isn't only about putting someone in jail. So now we're going to shift our focus away from prison bars and onto the practical side of things, rebuilding a life. And we do that through something called civil liability.
I always like to picture justice as having two arms. The criminal arm is the one we see in all the movies. It's the one that punishes the offender for the wrong they did to society. But there's this other arm, the civil one, and it's just as important. This arm doesn't reach for the offender. It reaches out to the victim. Its entire purpose isn't to punish, but to repair. It asks a simple question: what did this person lose, and what can we do to help make them whole again? And that is the whole point of Article 345. So this table lays it all out pretty clearly. For those really severe personal violations, rape, seduction, abduction, the offender has two sets of duties. They have a duty to the victim, which means paying them damages, and they have a duty to any child that might result from the crime, which means acknowledging and supporting that child. Now, for adultery and concubinage, the harm is seen as being against the marriage itself, so the civil duty there is all about compensating the offended spouse for the damage done to them by that betrayal. Let's get really clear on this word, indemnify, because it's crucial. This is not a fine. A fine is punishment money you pay to the government. Indemnification is completely different. It is a direct payment from the person who caused the harm to the person who was harmed. It's the law's way of saying, you broke this, you have to help pay to fix it. It's about restoration, not just retribution. So what kind of harm are we talking about here? Well, damages for these kinds of crimes go way beyond a broken window or a stolen purse. The harm is deep. So the compensation can cover the actual real-world costs of things like therapy or medical bills. It can cover lost wages if the victim is so traumatized they can't work. And importantly, it tries to put a monetary value on the invisible injuries, the psychological trauma, the emotional pain, and the incredible damage done to a person's dignity and their sense of safety in the world.
And in the situation where a child is born as a result of one of these crimes, the law gets very, very serious about the offender's parental duties. It breaks it down into two parts. First, there's acknowledgement. The offender has to legally recognize the child as their own. Now, there's a catch. They can't do this if another law makes it impossible, like if they're already married to someone else. But, and this is the big one, the second duty, financial support, is absolute. It doesn't matter if they can legally acknowledge the child or not. In every single case, they are required to financially support that child. The law makes sure that the child, who is completely innocent in all of this, is taken care of.
That brings us to our final section, and it is by far the most disturbing one. What happens when the very people our society trusts to protect the vulnerable, we're talking parents, teachers, guardians, don't just fail to do their job, but actually help commit the crime? This is what the law sees as the ultimate betrayal, and it reserves its absolute harshest judgment for it.
Our whole legal system is built on layers of trust. We give certain people, shepherds if you will, a special duty to protect the flock. Article 346 deals with the horrifying scenario where the shepherd doesn't just fall asleep on the job. It's about when the shepherd actively conspires with the wolf, when they abuse their position of power and trust to help the harm happen.
And the law is crystal clear about who these shepherds are. It's a list of roles that are defined by trust and authority. You have ascendants, that means parents and grandparents. You have legal guardians. And critically, you have teachers and anyone else who is officially entrusted with taking care of or guiding a young person. The common theme that ties them all together is that they were in a confidential, authoritative relationship with the victim and they betrayed it.
And here is where you see just how seriously the law takes this betrayal. In a normal criminal case, an accomplice, someone who helps the main offender, gets a lighter sentence. But Article 346 throws that rule right out the window. If one of these trusted people acts as an accomplice, the law says their betrayal is so awful that they get a penalty upgrade. They are punished as if they were the principal offender. Because their crime wasn't just helping someone else. Their crime was twofold. They aided the offense and they shattered a sacred trust. And for that, they pay the highest price.
And for people in the field of education who commit this kind of betrayal, the law adds one more devastating consequence. It's basically a professional death sentence. It's called perpetual special disqualification. And what that means is, on top of any jail time, they are permanently, as in for the rest of their natural life, banned from ever being a teacher again, or from holding any similar kind of public office. The law makes absolutely sure that someone who abuses that kind of trust will never, ever be put in a position to do it again.
So, we end with the big question that all of these laws leave us with. By giving the victim the only key to the courtroom, the law champions the idea of individual choice and the deeply private journey of healing. But at the same time, it creates this natural tension with what society often wants, which is public justice and punishment for all crimes. How do you balance one person's private need to heal in their own way with the public's demand for justice? There's no easy answer, but it forces us all to think about what the true purpose of justice really is. Is it about public punishment, or is it about private restoration? Something to think about.